Now, this is a very important week across Africa, and not just Africa as a whole, but in particular in South Africa. Reason being, South Africa goes to the polls on 29th of May, where they elect their next government or their next leaders who come in. One of the key people we're looking at with this election is none other than Julius Malema. Why Malema? Because Malema is the leader of the EFF Party, and EFF is among the top 3 parties that are being looked at as a party that could take up the leadership of South Africa. So let's just go through a bit of history and just learn who is Malema and how did he become this influential and radical politician. Thanks for joining. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and share your feelings with us and what you know about Malema or didn't know and you've learned from this in the comment section. So Julius Malema is also nicknamed Juju. I don't know what Juju means in South Africa, but that's his nickname. He's a populist South African politician and the founder of the EFF Party, which is in full is the Economic Freedom Fighters Party, whose members are basically, most of those members are known with the red berets and the attire they put on even in parliament, and they're very entertaining and energetic, and most of them are pretty radical, just as their leader is. So Malema is married to one wife by the name Mantwa Matlala, and is a father of 3 children. I hope I pronounced the name right or correct. If not, South Africans, just tell us in the comment section how we pronounce that. So he was born on 3rd March 1981. Of course, that makes him now 43 years. And he was born to a single mom who worked as a domestic worker during the apartheid period. So Malema's mom is called Flora, and she died of an epileptic fit when Malema was still young. So after her death, the grandmother called Sarah, who we share a name with, stepped up and raised Malema to the man he's become. But the grandmother was not in any way involved in his politics per se. This is something he picked along the way, but the grandma is the one who raised the man now we see that is Malema. So at the age of 9, Malema joined the ANC party, that is the African National Congress, which happens to be South Africa's oldest party. And he joined an organization under ANC that was called Masupatsela, or in English that means Trailblazers. It's a wing for children, and Walter Silulu, the anti-apartheid activist, and was also a senior ANC member. So children were brought into this Masupatsela, and the things that kids were taught in this center was basically how to do poems, political conversations, which Malema says opened his eyes to politics and basically just understanding how things ran in South Africa back then when he was a child and why they were running the way they were. So under this organization, of course, something else he says he learned that the lack of basic needs such as food, shelter, electricity, water was a doing of the white people. Remember, this is a season when apartheid was high and black people were basically of African origin, went through the roughest of inhumanity under apartheid. So during this period, Malema experienced, while at the ANC, they lacked food sometimes, they lacked electricity and water. And basically from the way now, the indoctrination that happened as a kid was that he grew up knowing that white people needed to be defeated for him and his kinsmen to gain freedom and enjoy the basic needs. So this was why you see him aggressive today is because he learned it at a very early age. So now, after joining ANC, besides now the poems and other things that they were taught, his first task in participating in a political movement of some sort was basically to supply tires to protesters that would barricade roads. So of course, during that period, there was a lot of protest and demonstrations that were happening in South Africa as they agitated for their freedom. So Malema and other children would advance pushing tires. You know the games that in Africa kids play, pushing tires. So they would do that. So they would do that and take these tires all the way to somewhere where they had been assigned by the leaders to, just go drop them. But of course, as they did this, police wouldn't even suspect anything because it's kids that were playing. So they would do this, and once they got to the location where the protesters had planned to have demos, now they would run back home, and now these children would just run back and leave the tires on the road. So then what would happen is that the protesters would come, burn these tires, and of course barricade roads, and it would be a run, of course, with police and South Africans as it happened back then. So that was his first immediate task that he's spoken about. So in 1993, when he was 12, he was assigned a bus. Remember, this is a season when now apartheid was coming to an end, and South Africa was going for its first election in 94. But just during this campaign, so Malema was assigned to a bus that carried the elderly people to polling stations. And he had, with him on his shirt was a sticker of the ANC that had the ANC party logo. So you may wonder why he had to put on that sticker. That sticker basically was to help these old people understand when they went to the voting and polling stations, because it was the first time, what was expected of them and what they were going to, you know, like when you vote and you do the tick or whatever X you put. This basically was used as a guide to these people to tell them that this sticker you see here is what, when you go to the ballot boxes and the papers, this, when you see this logo, that's what you check as a vote for a president. Also consider it's funny to learn that most people are most old people by then had no idea how Nelson Mandela looked like. So the ANC party really did the mobilizing to ensure that they would get their own as president. And this is how Malema now educated the young people with civic education of some sort through these buses and the old people. So in 1994, then he was now the following year, his role was to remove a party of the National Party posters that were placed so high on electronic poles and outside police stations. And he says that all this time while he was doing this, his mother and the grandmother had no idea where he was going, because he would step out of their homestead like any other kids going to play. But then again, he would end up at the ANC and do such things as this in politics, which his folks didn't know about. So it's very interesting to see that he started his political lifestyle as a young child and was still canny while still pretty young. But I think these are the things that actually made him the politician that we see today. So Malema says that he began handling firearms at the age of 13, where he was inducted into military training, but these reports have raised some questions as there is no circumstantial evidence, but he has spoken about it. So he says that's where he learned the whole military thing as a person at the age of 13. I believe these engagements is what actually pushed him to activism, because if this sort of activism is, you engage in such activism between the age of 9 to 13, then there's a lot that goes on in your mind, and that early life is actually a reflection of the resilience and determination that defines his political career today. So now when he turned 14, he was elected as both chairperson of the African National Congress Youth League for a branch, and later in 1997 he became the chair of the Congress of South African Students, which is COSAS, for the Limpopo province. So after that, Malema was elected the national president of the student, that is COSAS movement, in 2001. And during this season, he was actually, while he served as the president, national leader at this point, he would actually mobilize students into politics, demonstrations, and different issues that were still going on across South Africa during this period. In 2003, as the head of COSAS, Malema actually said in a statement that the student union would do anything, including burning the prison she's locked in, to prevent the jailing of Winnie Madikizela Mandela, that is Mandela's ex-wife, and actually the late wife, and who was also she remains as one of Malema's role models. So why this was important to note is that he was superly active in political sector. And when they wanted to jail Winnie, she came out among other students, leading students, that they were ready to demonstrate to ensure she doesn't stay in prison. In June 2008, again, he made headlines by vowing that the Youth League would take up arms in the prosecution of Jacob Zuma, that is South Africa's former president, for alleged fraud and corruption. And there's a statement that keeps haunting him to date, that he had said that we were prepared to die for Zuma. It was very interesting to learn that by this time he was ready to die for another politician, just to ensure that by then he's not put into jail. So this tells you Malema has been, like a stronghold person under the ANC, because this was during Zuma's reign when he was the ANC president. And with this, you can actually see his journey has not just begun when he's become, out here for everyone, and even now when he's actually running, hoping that his party wins the election. So Malema remains a proponent of nationalizing South Africa's mining industry and restructuring land reforms without compensation. So South Africa has had its fair share issues of land, especially from the apartheid season, where a lot of white South Africans gained a lot of land, while a lot of the blacks or Africans basically ended up not having land. So the inequalities have been there, and with his party now, the EFF, he's been key on fighting for this, even while he was at ANC. So due to his, he became very rough in terms of how he carried his politics. And of course, in 2012, due to his confrontational style of politics, hate speech, corruption allegations, and disrespect for the constitution of the ANC party, he was expelled from ANC party. That was somewhere in 2012. And in 2013, he actually tried to just go get a different sort of ruling, but the courts remained with the same, and nothing much was done for him in that area. So in 2013, he actually decided to form his own party, which is called the Economic Freedom Fighters Party, the EFF, which has become synonymous with the red beret that they wear and the aprons. And of course, he didn't go alone. He carried, since he was influential as a youth leader in ANC, he was able to pull a number of members from ANC now who helped him and joined him in the movement of the creation of the EFF Party. And EFF actually became big on the fight for economic justice, land reforms, and radical transformation. Of course, these are the things he was still fighting for as a youth leader under ANC. Malema, of course, continues even to date, calling for seizure of land without compensation and the removal of the willing buyer, willing seller principle that has caused a lot of inequalities in South Africa, basically. Malema has accused South Africans, white South Africans, oftentimes of stealing land, and again advocated for the redistribution of land without compensation. But he's not managed really to get that moving, because there's always a lot of court cases involved on this. So, of course, as a politician, I don't think there's any politician who's really able just to move without any, issues, especially legal affairs, for different matters. So Malema hasn't been exceptional, and he's been embroiled in a variety of legal issues in his political career. 2011, of course, it's the famous case he faced was about the Kill the Boer song, which he led during a party meeting, which didn't sit well with the ANC because they were against it. It was an anti-apartheid song which used to say, "Kill the Boer and shoot to kill the white farmers." So this, of course, didn't sit well with a lot of people. Of course, South Africa knowing the history of apartheid and how bad it was. So the High Court said it was against it. And it was not just the courts that were, and maybe people from ANC who were against that, but he received a lot of backlash from different organizations and even other countries. And one of the key people actually who condemned him for it was South African-born billionaire Elon Musk. He accused Malema of calling for a white genocide, but the courts did their thing, and so that was it. And people have actually made a lot of, now since then, the war between Malema and Elon sort of has become a social media thing every now and then. So after that, in 2014, now back to after he formed his own party. So in 2014, South Africa went into elections, and Malema took his seat in parliament as the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters Party. And by this time, actually, EFF garnered 25 seats in the National Assembly. Malema again was re-elected in 2019 and has been in parliament even to date. And EFF members are very, very super active, and they just make the South African parliament, it looks so much fun and chaotic at the same time. So EFF has actually activated that on so many occasions. And several times EFF members, including Malema himself, have been sent out of parliament for different things. Sometimes just causing the drama, sometimes they'll dance, they'll do all the funny things in that parliament. And I think South Africa is one of the most alive parliaments in Africa. I don't think there's any other nation that has such an entertaining parliament across Africa. But South Africa stands on that. And as we speak, these key major parties, ANC, of course, is the oldest political party in South Africa. That is key, and because they've always been in, the leaders of South Africa since independence have come from the ANC party. So there's the EFF, and there's also Democratic Alliance, which are actually major influences this time. And we can only wait and see if Malema's dreams of leading South Africa come to life, or he will actually just continue being on the side, running as, an activist and radical politician. So we wish to tell our South African brothers and sisters that as you go to vote, we wish you peace, and we hope that you can do it peacefully and democratically so that you elect someone who has your interests at heart. You can actually share in the comment section which party do you think will take up South Africa leadership, and who do you think is actually going to be the next president for South Africa. Thanks for watching, and I hope you picked a thing or two about Julius Malema, aka Mr. Juju. See you on the next one.